Hello. Hope everyone can hear me all right. Thanks for coming to my talk. Hi everyone, I'm Shravan Rangarajan. I'm a senior product manager in Amazon Web Services. I work on the containers team, specifically on Amazon Elastic Container Registry, which I'm going to talk to you about in this session. A little bit about me. I've been in AWS for a little over 2 years now. This is my second in-person reInvent, third overall if you count last year's online one. Before that, I was also a product manager at Microsoft Azure for 5 years, working in containers and other spaces as well. How many folks have been to reInvent before? Okay, so I think like a good amount of first-time folks. Yeah, welcome. You know, it's going to be a huge, busy, jam-packed week ahead. Lots of great sessions, content to go around. Pace yourselves, and of course, lots of social gatherings and parties and whatnot happening as well. Yeah, it feels really good to be back. Great to see the energy and vibe, and yeah, so let's get to it. So I'm going to begin by speaking about a little bit just about what ECR is, what containers is, or what containers are, just as a quick refresher, and then just right away dive into what's actually new, what came out with ECR. We made a bunch of announcements this morning, and there'll be more this week as well. And then I'll also include a demo within that too. And then finally, I'll talk about what's coming next, what's coming in 2022, what have we also launched earlier this year that I won't be talking about as well, and then we'll finish it up with Q&A. All right, so how many folks know what a container is? Okay, most people. So the thing I really love about containers, and if you just take the word container itself, like many different images come to mind. Like when I first learned about containers, I immediately jumped to the analogy of shipping containers. When you have so much merchandise and so many goods just being transported across the globe, and how people are sending food, people are sending electronics, people are sending who knows what. And all of these things, the whole supply chain is just made so efficient because the packaging is standardized in these TEUs, or I believe they're called the 20-foot equivalents, or the shipping containers. And just because anything you package inside that container, and just because the containers are the same, any port in the world knows exactly how to handle and process them. And that's the reason why I really like that analogy is because it applies so well also with software containers, where you as an application developer, sorry about that. The ultimate goal is to actually run your code somewhere and get your customers to use that, and to do that at scale, where there might be other code running in that hardware or in those environments as well. You want a really efficient and standardized way to do that. So containers offers you the ability to package not only your code, but any dependencies or other libraries that you're using as well that you may not have authored yourselves, and also the runtime or the framework or the operating systems that actually are used to run that code, packaged into one bundle, or the container, where we call a container image itself, and that's what's actually gets sent to a virtual machine or any other server to actually run those instances of your application. And the analogy I like to use with an image is you can think of a blueprint. So a blueprint for a house is just schematics, but you use that blueprint to actually build one or many houses in a neighborhood. And they could all be the same. They might have some slight variations and whatnot, but essentially the blueprint is the standardized template in order to do that. And that's the same with the container image. The image is exactly what the container should be, and then when that image gets to a virtual machine or any other environment in order to run the application, it gets run as a container. And a container registry is a service that stores all these images at scale. So when you're running hundreds or maybe thousands of containers in production, you need a way to actually store all these, keep them up to date, keep them secure, which is what we're going to be speaking about a lot in this session. And you might even you need to do that all around the world if you have applications running globally. So container registries offer that scalable storing in order to keep your container images safe, up to date, and then also be able to fetch those images into any environment that you need to run them really quickly. So that's exactly also what Amazon ECR is. ECR stands for Elastic Container Registry. It's Amazon's managed container registry service where we provide a container registry in the cloud. And how ECR really works, it's just, I guess the best way to describe it is in 3 types of customer scenarios. So the first one is you actually have to get your container images into a registry first, and that's commonly called pushing your containers. So that's where you're on your laptop, you might build the container with your app and its dependencies and whatnot, and then you push or upload that container into ECR, into any AWS region, because ECR is available everywhere. And second is when that image is actually stored in ECR, there are a number of things you can do to get more analytics and insights while that image is stored there. So for example, you can scan the image to run to find any vulnerabilities or any other issues. Like I was saying with before, when you're packaging your app in any dependencies and you might be using other frameworks or whatnot, you might be using other base containers or container images to build your own containers, and that's a very common practice. So scanning your images is a very common thing to do to see what all comes out of the software that you had downloaded from third parties. And then finally, the third scenario with ECR, or with any container registry, and in my opinion, the most important scenario is actually downloading those images or pulling those images to actually run the containers. Because the container image by itself isn't really doing anything. It's just sitting there. It's just a blueprint that's stored somewhere safely, locked in a drawer. But you actually want to build a house, or you want to run an application with that blueprint eventually. And Amazon ECR is integrated with many of the services, the purpose-driven services that run containers today. So some of them are Amazon EKS, our managed Kubernetes service, Amazon ECS, our managed containers orchestrator as well, and the AWS Fargate modes, or the serverless modes of both of those. You can also run containers directly on EC2 instances yourselves, or you can even run container images that have your Lambda functions in them and run those in Lambda 2. And there's AWS App Runner for running web applications that are based off of containers. There's many ways to run containers in AWS, each with their own pros and cons, but ECR is at the heart of all of that. So because regardless of how you decide to run your containers, whatever compute service you choose, your container images are stored in ECR, where we have the most scalable storage, the most reliable performance as well when you're downloading those images to the services that need to run them. And then also the security components with that second scenario I mentioned, where you can scan your images within ECR and also use IAM access controls to restrict who's allowed to push images, who's allowed to download them and run them, and even private link, making sure that entire process stays within your network. And I was talking a little bit about the scale and the storage of ECR, but one fun fact I wanted to share with you before we get into the launches is that ECR is responsible for serving 8 billion, so 8 billion with a B, image pulls per week. So to put that number in perspective, I think by the end of this 1-hour talk, there will be about like 74 million image pulls. So that's 74 million different container images that are being pulled from ECR in order to go run somewhere in AWS or elsewhere, which is really remarkable. And that just speaks to ECR's maturity as a global container registry. So enough about the introductions, so let's actually get to some of the new announcements. And the way I've organized this is within those 3 segments as well, the push, the storage, and the pull, we have announcements or things happening on each of those fronts. So first I'm going to talk about the second one, just because that one's the most keen to security. So when your images are actually in ECR, and I talked about scanning them, finding vulnerabilities and whatnot, we're now offering a new scanning service or an option to scan your images when anytime they're pushed to ECR or even stored in ECR, and this uses another service called Amazon Inspector. Amazon Inspector is a brand new offering of a service that launched today, this morning actually, and it's pretty much AWS's managed software scanning solution. So what customers really told us about storing their images in ECR and their asks on vulnerability scans is that they have to, this is something they really want to do, but they're always looking to offload some of the more overhead type tasks like managing things outside their applications onto AWS. So customers they preferred not to manage their own security tools or security software, and also having to know exactly how to run it, when to run it, what to run it on, what not to run it on. Like those are all things that many customers didn't feel like they wanted to at least offload that to AWS. So with Inspector they can, because Inspector is a managed service. The software scanning service itself runs in Amazon, and it gets triggered anytime you do an image push. The cool thing about this though is anytime you do an image push, Inspector will continuously scan that image. So let's say you push an image on day 0, and then it scans it then. Nothing is found, everything's good. But then in day 1 or day 2, a vulnerability is found, and Inspector, and that gets reported in the standard vulnerability feeds. And Inspector catches that, and they're able to report that back to you, even though that image hasn't been updated at all. It's just been sitting in ECR. So that's super cool. Also, another great thing about Inspector scanning is administration teams that manage their registries, they want to enforce best practices without hampering on developer productivity. And what that really means is they want their developers to develop as fast as possible. They want them to do that in a safe manner. So one of the best practices, like when you talk about best practices, security is always brought up. And with this Amazon Inspector scanning service in ECR, you can actually enable scanning based on not just your account or an account, like a single account that the ECR registry is in, but across all accounts in a given AWS organization. And also any findings that are reported by Inspector are sent to AWS Security Hub, where they can be triaged and otherwise investigated. Some cool things about the scanning itself, many scanning services only scan the operating system software that's in the images, but Inspector also scans the programming language packages that are being used. And it does that based by image layer itself. As I was saying before, how sometimes container images are built on top of one another. Inspector will scan all the images, or all the layers rather, inside your image. And also, some of you who've been using ECR for a while, you probably are thinking, what about, you guys already have an image scanning solution that's free. Like, what's happening to that? So, we at AWS, we believe in choice. We believe in the right tool for the right job, and that's not going away. We're going to be making more updates to that, and it's still going to exist side by side with Inspector. It'll be known as basic scanning, whereas enhanced scanning is going to be the one that's powered by Amazon Inspector. And I'll just quickly go through how this actually works, and we'll start with the basic scanning. So it works pretty similarly, from your client, let's say from your laptop or from a build system where you actually built your container image. You push that into Amazon ECR, and the basic scanning, we we manage a open source software scanning product called Claire, and we host that, and we scan your images for you, and then we return those results within ECR, and you can see those results in your console or through the CLI or API commands to get the findings. But one caveat with this offering in ECR is that it only works when the first time you push that image. So in order to trigger another scan, you either have to do that manually or push the image again, basically. So that's what I mean by it repeats every time an image is pushed. Whereas with Inspector, the beginning works similarly. The client has to push an image, and then the inspector service is what actually scans the image, and it'll return those results in ECR, but also in the inspector console. So the new inspector service not only scans container images, but it also scans EC2 AMIs, and it'll aggregate all those findings for you in their console as well. And it, as I said before, it sends all of that to AWS Security Hub. But one key difference is it continuously scans what's in your ECR registry instead of only just scanning on push. So yeah, folks can take a picture of that if they want. I'll give folks a sec. Quickly stay hydrated. Oh, and my demo laptop froze, or went to sleep, even though I turned that off. Weird how that works. Okay. So that's great. Scanning images is awesome. That's only one piece of the puzzle, and it's really focused on when your images are actually within ECR, how do we make them more secure? How do we find out more about any vulnerabilities that may exist? But what can we do also in the other two areas when we upload the images or when we download the images? So another amazing new announcement that we made this morning is a new feature called ECR Pull-Through Cache. And here, as I've been really talking mostly about just pulling images just directly from ECR and using these images as the applications that you've built. But a common scenario is actually running containers that were not necessarily built by you. They were built by some other third-party company, such as an observability sidecar, or also, you need to use base images or starting images that have the operating system that you want to build your application on top of. And these are just collectively known as public images, and they reside on public registries. So what our customers really wanted here is, they're frequent users of both application images from their own ECR private registries, but then also they use public images for various means, such as building those application images or also running those public images side by side. And they wanted all the benefits of ECR for that second class of images as well. They wanted ECR security through scanning or through IAM controls. They wanted ECR's availability as well, which is pretty much AWS's availability. And yes, the governance through IAM controls. And they've noticed that the features that you get within ECR are different than the features that you would get on the various public registries that are out there. So we decided to build this mechanism where we will actually go and cache images that are in public registries. So you specify which public registries you want to cache from. So right now we support ECR Public, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on, and Quay.io. And any repositories there you can cache within your ECR account itself. And those are treated just like any other ECR repository. A repository is just a collection of different image versions. And with that, you do get the same AWS availability and reliability as you would with any ECR image. You get the various security features like private link, IAM access controls. And another neat thing about this is so in order to get around this and just get public images into ECR, a lot of customers just built some sort of caching mechanism on their own. And if the public image in the public registry gets updated, your system needs to know about that and bring that newest update into your cache at some point. So that all had to be programmed manually. But now ECR, through this feature, we actually do that automatically on behalf of customers. So how this works is, let's go through the scenario before. So if you had to actually build your own solution to cache public images within ECR, well, first you actually have to get that image from the public registry. You probably download that to your client, so you can pull it, and then you then push that to your private ECR registry itself, and then every time it updates in the public registry, so you have to have some sort of tracking mechanism to know when that happens. Every time there's an update there, then you have to go and take that update and then push that back to ECR itself. So with ECR pull through cache, how it works on the very first time is sort of similar, where you actually have to go and you create what's called a pull through cache rule, and I'll actually be doing a demo of this in just a sec. And once you create that rule, which maps which public registry you want to cache images from, you can just initiate a pull given a ECR URL that will show you, and I'll show you exactly what that URL would look like, but it just looks like any other ECR URL for a repository. It just has a prefix of the namespace that the public registry is referred to, which is configured in the rule. And then ECR on your behalf will go and fetch that image from the public registry. It will bring that image back and create a repository within ECR and put that image in there. And then finally, it'll return that to the client. So this is what happens on the very first time, and that's just because nothing exists in your cache yet. So ECR has to go and fetch that from the public registry, like ECR Public or Quay, and then brings that to your account. And then once that image is in your account in your own repository, then it's yours, and it's treated just like any other image that's there, like any other application image that you may have. So then I'll go to the next slide and show actually every single time that you do a pull after that, though, your traffic never reaches the public registry. So you're just pulling directly from ECR, just as you would with any other image pull that you'd be doing. And in the background, ECR will be synchronizing your cache with what's in the public registry whenever there's an update there. So now let's do a demo of this. I have a live demo here, but I also have a video as a backup in case the demo gods are not with me today, so let's see. Oh, there it is. I got it. Yeah. So here I just have the ECR Console open. If any of you go to the ECR Console today, you'll see two banners here announcing both of these features. You have one that's about pull-through cache, and then the other about enhanced scanning with Inspector. And you can see here I have 0 repositories available in ECR right now. So let's change that. I'm going to go into my private registry page, and you can see different settings here. There's 2 new ones. There's one for pull-through cache and then one for scanning as well. I won't go into the scanning, even though I just spoke about it. I won't go into this demo because there's another session tomorrow that will talk a little bit about that more, and I don't want to do the same demo as them. So let's go here, and it's asking me to create a rule, and let's see what that's all about. So what this rule really means is ECR needs to know which public registry you want to start caching images from and how to actually formulate the URL that you'll be using to pull those images. So when I click ECR Public, this field automatically gets filled with the ECR Public URL, and then it offers also a suggestion for the repository namespace that I'll use. And this is just essentially a prefix to distinguish these types of repositories from anything else in your account. So let's click Save, and you can see this here. So the public registry, the rule is just listed there for ECR Public, and the namespace I use is ECR-Public. So let's actually see what this looks like. And as I was saying before, in order to start caching images, all you need to do is execute a pull. So let's do that right now. And this is the image I'm gonna pull. So you see that the URL looks pretty standard as just an ECR repository, but you can see this ECR public prefix, which is I just configured now. And then this is the name of the repository and image that I am caching. And this is a little bit forward-looking because there's another announcement we'll talk about later in the session for the Docker official images that are on ECR Public, but that's the image that I'm caching right now. I'm just caching the Ubuntu image that's one of the Docker Hub official images that's hosted on ECR Public. So it looks like that worked, and what this actually did was go to ECR Public, take that image, bring it back to my client, but then in the background, it put that image into my ECR repository. And let's do this with another one too. So let's do this with something different, like Amazon Linux. Cool. So it's really just as easy as that. Like, all I had to do was configure the rule, and then I can just start pulling any image I want, as long as I know what the image is and if they're what prefixes it may have. So for this one, for example, in Amazon Linux, it's under the Amazon Linux repository name, and then Amazon Linux is under the Amazon Linux prefix, I mean. So let's actually see what happened in the console, though. If we go into repositories, so as if you remember, I didn't have any repositories here before, but now I have two, and you can see what they're called. So they just have that prefix ECR Public Amazon Linux or ECR Public Docker and Ubuntu, and they look like any other repositories, right? You can even go inside them and see that you have the images here, and this is another thing with if you decide to pull an image that is a multi-architecture image, because ECR cannot predict which clients you may use, and ECR through pull-through cache, it acts as a true cache, and it will cache all the architecture images for you within ECR, so that when your clients pull from ECR afterwards, it'll know exactly which one to deliver to your client. So let's see exactly what that looks like. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the Ubuntu image just so that it's not cached locally, and then I'm going to do a pull again. So this time I'm doing the same pull I did in the beginning, the same URL, but instead of getting it directly from the public registry, it's going to get it directly just from my ECR account. So ideally, it should be a lot faster. Yeah. So because I removed it just so that it wasn't cached and so that the pull would actually succeed. So that's cool. And I also just want to show that these images, they're not being altered or modified in any way throughout this process. So if we see here, The image ID of that Ubuntu one starts with BA6. We can even pull the real official Ubuntu image from Docker Hub. And we can even pull the one from ECR Public as well. So the reason why it didn't take long at all is because the same image is already on my laptop and cached, which it kind of proves my point that the images are the exact same. And if you look here now, we have 3 images, all with the same image ID, but you can see that they came from different sources. So one of them is from my ECR repository. One of them is the official Ubuntu image on Docker Hub, and then one of them is that same official image that's on Docker Hub, but is also hosted on ECR Public. So this is, I mean, you can see right away that I can just start like pulling anything I want. Let's do like Nginx. Anyone have a suggestion of another like common Docker Hub official image that I can pull? And just you can say it out loud if you want. Sorry? Python? Yeah. I think it's just Python, right? So the same thing here is happening. It's just getting those images from ECR Public, bringing it to my client, and then also in the background, it creates the repository and puts the images there. So that's a really neat part about this feature, where we're actually creating the repository for you before the images actually go there. And if you've used ECR before, right now, in order to just push any images into ECR, you have to create a repository yourself. But with this feature, you don't even need to do that. So let's see, I have a bunch of images here: Python, Nginx, Amazon Linux, Ubuntu, or 3 Ubuntu images. And then I go here to my private repositories, and they're all there, and the images are there as well. But the point I'm making here with this last bit is you can see how this can maybe get a little bit out of control really quickly, where if any of your clients have access to pull from from ECR, they can just start creating repositories and caching whatever they want from the public registries, right? And an administrator or a security conscious person probably doesn't really want them to do that. So one thing we've also added with pull through cache is permissions on who can actually do this type of caching and who can pull these images and who has access to create repositories or do this create on pull experience when initiating the cache. So this is what I was talking about before with IAM controls. Typically when you're using public images and you're pulling them directly from the public registry, you're not able to gatekeep or do governance on them because those images don't exist in AWS, so you can't really do anything with IAM policies. But with pull through cache and bringing those images into ECR, you can. And not only can you do it with the images once they're in ECR, or after they're in ECR, you can even do it before they're in ECR. So what this is here is a pull through cache policy. I'll just give it a name really quickly. And I can choose any IAM entity I want, so I'm just going to choose my test account. And here you can choose the specific repository namespace that you want to add rules to. So I only have one, ECR Public, but that just auto-populates. And here you can even specify the granular repository names that you want to allow or deny. So some of the ones we just used were Nginx and Python, so why don't we just add those here. Okay. So once you save that, it looks like any standard IAM policy, and folks who have used ECR might have worked with these for registry policies or repository policies. But let's walk through exactly what this did. So By default, it creates an allow policy for that specific IAM entity, and it gives it access to 2 actions. One of them is create repository, which is what's required to actually create that repository, obviously, during that create on pull experience. And the other one is an internal API called batch import upstream image. And that's actually the API that we're calling in our pull through cache service to import that image from an upstream public registry into your account. But if you don't want any clients or specific users doing that, you can add a policy here and change this allow to deny in order to deny certain users, or you can allow certain users for specific repositories as well. So allow the caching of Nginx in Python, but not something else. And yeah, I'll switch back to the slides now. Luckily that went pretty smoothly and I don't have to use my backup video, which is here. All right, so that was, we covered security when you store the images in ECR. We covered security and governance and a new announcement when you pull images from ECR. What about when you're pushing images to ECR, that first aspect? And one thing customers always ask us about is, how do I know like whatever ends up in ECR, how do I know I can trust that? Because sometimes the personas that are pulling those images from ECR are not necessarily the same people that actually put those images there, right? Or they're not the same service accounts, or in really large organizations, there are many moving parts, and you need to make sure that you can actually trust the content that you get from ECR in order to run it in production. So this is something that we're currently working on right now. It's called container image signing, where customers pretty much asked us to build them a way where they can not only trust the image, but also verify container images based on where they came from and making sure that they're intact, or their origin and integrity, before those images are run in production. And the way you do that is by actually signing the image. Because what is really signing anyways? It's saying that you agree to something and that I'm adding my signature to attest to this document or to this image. And once you sign an image, when that signature would stay with the image and travel wherever it goes. So from where you sign it in your build pipeline into ECR, and then finally wherever it's run. And where it's run is where you actually verify that, okay, I only want to run images that were signed by this person, and that person, and myself. And you'll be able to do that by seeing the image and its signature and using APIs provided by us, or actually functionality built into even some of our services eventually that will verify that signature. You can kind of think of it as like getting like a document notarized, like the notary verifies that for you, right? Or they verify that you are in fact the person that signed that. So this is really neat because as I was saying before, there's different ways or different types of images people use with the private images in your account for your applications, but also the public images that you get from public registries. And we're building this with an open standard, and we're partnering with other cloud providers and vendors in order to make sure that signing images and adding signatures to images is just as open and portable as container images themselves. Not only the signing, but also the verifying. And that's being done in a project called Notation under the Notary V2 umbrella. I think the other really cool aspect about this is once those images get somewhere like Amazon ECS or EKS, you'd be able to configure a policy, as I was saying, that I want this image to, or I only trust these types of signers or these profiles or these users that have signed images. And I only want to use images that were signed by them. That's how you actually know as an administrator that I can trust this image in order to run it in production. And once you configure that policy with the service that runs containers, that orchestrator would do the rest and do the verification. Anytime you do an image pull, before that container is actually run, it would do that check, and if it didn't pass that check, it could prevent that deployment or maybe just run it and give you a warning saying that this image wasn't signed properly, but we're going to run it anyways. It's up to you as an administrator on what you'd like to configure. But that's it's something in progress right now, and you can follow the progress there in the links I provided below, and the slides will be available online later as well. So I talked a lot, like the three announcements that the three updates that I just mentioned are mainly around just Amazon ECR itself, but and even I guess I did talk about ECR Public a little bit in my demo, but for those who have been using containers in ECR a lot, you're probably wondering like, well, what's really going on with ECR Public? It's a public registry that we launched last year at reInvent actually, and it's provided by Amazon. So these are images that are uploaded by anybody, so other publishers or users, and they're publicly consumable to any client that wants to use them. So in contrast with Amazon ECR, where it's typically images that you're using for your own organization, you may use ECR Public if you're vending software that you're selling to other clients, your customers, or you're building open source products and you want to share that with others. You can do that on ECR Public. And it works pretty much the same way, where the publishers or the developers of the image push those images to Amazon ECR Public, and we do a bunch of things behind the scenes, such as storing them in certain regions and also having a CloudFront distribution to make image pulls super performant, and also making sure that those images are available when you need them. And the storage works the same, so that that first scenario, the push comes from the publisher. Storage works the same. It's in Amazon ECR Public, and you can, as a customer, you can go to the public gallery and just discover all the images that are there. That's gallery.ecr.aws, and then you can just pull those images directly from there as you would with any public registry or any registry. So the new thing that we have with Amazon ECR Public, and I was alluding to this in my demo a little bit, is super exciting news that the Docker official images are now being hosted also on Amazon ECR Public. I think the official announcement's going to go out any moment now, but what this really means is Docker official images are some of the most popular container images out there that are updated the most frequently and also consumed by the most users. So in my demo, I was using products like Ubuntu and Nginx and Python. There's WordPress, there's Mongo. These are all images that Docker owns. They build the images from those various source repos that those images exist in. And as I said, it's any popular image, not necessarily from Docker itself. But Docker is the custodian of building that image, hosting it on Docker Hub, and then vending it out to customers. And these are like 200 of the most popular container images out there, and now they're also on ECR Public to use. And the great thing about using them on ECR Public is you can either pull them directly from ECR Public, and if you're pulling from an AWS account, that data transfer is free up to a certain limit, and you're getting that if your clients that are pulling that is also pulling those images from, if they're also in AWS regions, then you'll get a super fast pull performance as well, especially and the other thing about Docker official images is what I was showing in the demo, where if you want more security on those images, such as the governance and the IAM controls, or if you want to use those images only within your own network, such as through private link, then you can use pull through cache and cache those Docker Hub official images within your Amazon ECR account. And you can do that because they're now hosted on ECR Public. Cool. So I'm going to just wrap up with some general announcements, or I guess just facts about what other things we've launched this year, and also what's to come and what to expect with Amazon ECR. So we made a number, and what I've included here on the slide is just some highlights. It's not exhaustive of every single innovation or feature that we launched. But some of the things that I just wanted to share with you in case you were unaware. So like tags and download counts, and you're going to be seeing a lot more updates to ECR Public itself, but we're continuously pushing the envelope there on the developer experience and being able to search for tags and also see which images are super popular. Within ECR Private also, we're continuously increasing limits for, as we said before, there's 8 billion images that are pulled every week. So we increased the layers, the max layer size that you can use, and also how often an account can pull directly from ECR, so 2,000 times per second. Another thing is private link, which is security related, keeping all of your network traffic within that's restricted in your own network and not allowing access to the outside internet. We've expanded that to pretty much every commercial and even non-commercial region of ECR now. And anytime a new region launches, ECR is already available in that new region, but also it'll be available with private link during a new region launch. Another thing we added on ECR Public is a publisher page where you can actually go and see more information about a publisher, like various Amazon teams or other AWS partners, what they're all about, what their images are about, and documentation on those images as well. Another thing we did was for image replication, which means if you have images in one region and you want to also store those images in another region without automatically pushing them there, you can automatically replicate those images now, not just every image in your registry, but by individual repositories themselves, which lets you replicate exactly what you want. So for example, maybe only replicating your prod repositories. And it also lets you save costs since you don't have to replicate everything. Another cool feature is just when you're browsing that gallery and you see a container image that looks interesting to you, you may want to get started and run it right away, but rather than having to pull that into your client and then run that in Fargate or AppRunner or something else, we've added a button to specific web app images in ECR Public where you can just click that button and run that image directly in AWS AppRunner. And there are a few builder sessions later on in the conference that will take you through that as well. But it's a super neat feature where you can just one-click run a container just to test it out. Another thing was that we launched very recently was being able to run containers in Lambda from different accounts. This is a very common pattern where many customers store a lot of their images within one registry in an account, and their compute might be in different accounts or even in different regions. And with Lambda now, you can follow that same pattern by keeping your images in a different account, so maybe some administration account, and then running Lambda functions in various other accounts. And then I'll wrap up this slide with just the 3 announcements that I mentioned in the talk today. So we announced enhanced scanning with Amazon Inspector, the ECR pull-through cache, and also the Docker Hub, the Docker official images on ECR Public. And these are some other highlights. Again, it's not an exhaustive list of what's to come with ECR, but these are some of the big things that we are working on, we are thinking about in next year. So as I was mentioning before on image scanning, we're going to be offering 2 modes side by side. There's the basic mode and the enhanced mode, and within the basic mode, we're using an older version of the software, Claire. We're using V2, and we're going to be upgrading that to the newest one, V4, to be able to find more, to use the latest vulnerability feeds and find more issues that way. We're going to also be adding more insights within ECR itself. So this is really relevant to that second user scenario where once the images are actually in ECR, what security and analytics and data and findings can I get? So you'll be able to see how often your images are being pulled from within your private ECR registry, and also the timestamps of when those images were last pulled, which is really cool because you can see then which images are actually popular and they're recently being used by any clients or any other teams in your organization. And that's really useful when you want to clean up images that are not being used anymore. But you don't want to remove those images just in case someone might be using them. But this way you'll be able to know if they haven't been used in a while. We're doing some cool work also with the Fargate team on speeding up the runtime, or speeding up rather the start time of containers running in Fargate and doing some innovations there. There is an open issue on our containers GitHub roadmap about that as well, so I don't want to talk a little about that too much. And then a few other things that we're doing is you probably saw that ECR, the URL I used in my demo, I used that many times, and you probably saw how long it was. And many of our customers have asked us for a more simplified version of that doesn't necessarily include the account ID or the region in it, or even the ability to just bring your own domain and use your own URLs. So those are two things that we're working on as well. As a follow-up to pull-through cache, right now we're supporting public images or public registries because that's what we had received the most feedback on first. Customers wanted the same features with public images as they do for their private images. And we're going to be following that up with the ability to do pull-through cache, but with authenticated registries as well. So many customers might have other registries outside of AWS that require authentication, and they want to cache those images within ECR, but they need a way to actually log into those registries and trigger that cache. So right now, our solution just works anonymously and doesn't require authentication, but this would work if you're a Docker Hub or like any other private registry that you have. You'd be able to log in when you create that rule and then cache images that way using that same user experience for creating the repo on pull. And then finally, container image signing, which I had already spoken about before. So everything I just mentioned is on what we call the containers public GitHub roadmap. So if you just Google AWS containers roadmap on GitHub, you'll see it's a GitHub project that just contains like hundreds of customer reported feature requests. And you can actually also see comments from the AWS team members, from myself, and from anyone on the containers team. So this is not limited to just ECR, but all the other container services as well, like ECS, EKS, Fargate, whatnot. And you can see, you can sort by popularity or like which features have the most upvotes and things like that to see what other customers are asking about. You can see how customers have solved certain problems as well. And also you can see, the most importantly, like which features is the AWS team currently working on, which features are under consideration, and which features have recently shipped also. So here are some related sessions to some of the things I spoke about. The first one is the builder session I mentioned, where you'll be able to do that one-click launch from ECR Public to App Runner. And you'll also be trying out the pull-through cache feature in that builder session as well. There's one of those today at 6:15, and then there's a repeat tomorrow at 1 p.m. The next one, SEC 225, is going to be a deep dive into the new Amazon Inspector service. So if you're really interested in that launch, I recommend you going to that session. That session and also 305 as well are going to be on Inspector. And 209 is a leadership session from our Vice President, Deepak Singh, and he's going to be talking about just the overall vision of containers on AWS. He'll be mentioning the launches that I mentioned today, but also other really cool launches that came out for other container services. And that one it's not live, but it will be streamed on the website. And I think it's going to be streamed at 5:30 today. And then there's a few other ones that I wanted to call out. Some neat sessions on ECS, EKS, and also AWS Copilot, which is a CLI that you can use to get started using containers on AWS really quickly. You can spin up a production environment in just one command. Yeah. So let's close things off. We talked about how regardless of what container service you use in AWS, ECR sits at the heart of that and serves images wherever they need to go. ECS, EKS, Fargate, AppRunner, Lambda, straight to EC2, even outside of AWS as well. We talked about vulnerability scanning with Amazon Inspector, being able to scan images continuously and report all of your findings or collect all of your findings within Security Hub. We talked about pull-through cache, the ability to cache public images within ECR, and you can even create governance on those images, on who's allowed to cache them and who's allowed to pull them. Image integrity through image signing and verifying, that's something in progress that we're working on, a big project for us next year. And then the Docker official images on ECR Public as well, the most popular container images that people use today that were on Docker Hub, and now they're also being hosted on ECR Public. And then we just wrapped it up with other recent launches in the last year and what's to come. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to me today and attending this session. I'll be here for questions. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'll probably just take questions outside. And you can connect with me now if you want, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. Thanks again.